On this edition of Early Look, I'm going to be previewing the middleweight main event headlining UFC Fight Night on October 19th between Michel Pereira and Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. My name is James Lynch. If you've never watched the show before, I'm going to go through a bunch of different stats, a bunch of different intangibles. Then I'm going to give you my prediction for this fight at the end. Some of the stuff, it may have relevance to you, it may not. What I want to get from you after watching this video is your prediction on this fight. I don't just want to pick. I want to hear how you think this fight unfolds on October 19th. So let me know in the comments after you're done watching this video. And while you're there, hit that like button. Really does help with the algorithm. And subscribe to this channel. I'm posting content on here every single day. Let's do a quick tail of the tape between these two. Michel Pereira will be 31 years old by the time this fight takes place. Same thing with Fluffy Hernandez. 6'1" to 6 feet tall, 73 to 75. So fairly even. Michel Pereira with a lot more fights. But they are the same age, and height and reach wise, they are very similar. Let's start first with Michel Pereira. I mentioned it, 31-11. He's got 2 no contests as well. He's got 11 knockouts, 9 submissions, and 11 decisions. He's currently ranked number 14 in the middleweight division. He'll have a 1-inch height advantage in this fight, no reach or age or anything like that. He's got performance of the night 5 times. He's got fight of the night 2 times. He trains out of Extreme Couture and is a BJJ black belt. Pereira did not have an amateur debut. He went straight to the pros way back in December of 2011, made his pro debut in December of 2011, didn't have an amateur career, and then made his UFC debut back in May of 2019. Let me find it here. That was the Danny Roberts fight. There we go. What a way to start his debut, getting that first round flying knee and punch knockout over Danny Roberts. That got him performance of the night in that one. Pereira is 9-2 in the UFC. He's got 5 finishes. Doesn't have any notable wins. I mean, you could mention maybe Nico Price or Ponzinibbio at one point was ranked, but he doesn't have any ranked wins. And even his last few fights, they're against, I'd say, pretty subpar competition. No major wins. And then he doesn't really have any major losses. The Diego Sanchez loss that he has here was a result of some bad fight IQ, took an illegal knee in that one, ended up losing to Diego Sanchez, but he was going to win. And also some bad fight IQ against Tristan Connolly, which cost him the fight. Of course, Sanchez and Connolly no longer with the UFC. So yeah, this is one of the first times I've done an early look where there's no notable wins and no notable losses for the fighter's career. It's just been kind of weird, even though he's had a lot of fights. Now, one thing with Pereira, he's been fairly active. You see a lot of canceled fights here. These were mainly his opponents. The only fight that really that sort of cost him here was the Stephen Wonderboy Thompson fight. And I forgot he came in at 4 pounds over. Wonderboy, we know the story there. He said, no way. I should say 3 pounds over because you needed to be 171. This wasn't a title fight. And yeah, so that's the only fight that he's had to withdraw from that wasn't injury related or anything else. Everything else here, I mean, do you remember when he was supposed to fight Sean Brady? I kind of forgot about that. This again was, for the most part, he is pretty good and ready to go. He's had some weight issues, but obviously at middleweight, no issues making 185. I think that's a better frame for him. He's a pretty big guy for welterweight, so glad he's moved up. He's only had 1 major layoff in his career. That's that being the fight from Ponzinibbio to Andre Petrovsky. There was a 511-day layoff in between there, but outside that, he's been pretty active, competing almost twice a year. So no major layoffs for Pereira going into this fight. In fact, this is his 3rd fight this year. So he's been very active in 2024, fighting in March, fighting in May, and now fighting in October. That's very good for a lot of fighters. Pereira, even though he has gone the distance before, no real major controversies in any of his decisions here. Even the Ponzinibbio fight, if you go and look at how people scored that one, let's have a look. I might be wrong about that, but I don't remember that being like super close. I thought he clearly won, but it ended up being a split in that one. And okay, split down the middle. So maybe that's one that could have gone the other way, but it's irrelevant. He's not in that division anymore. But as far as the overall record, maybe that's something you could take a look at. Maybe that could have gone the other way. Let's look at his stats right now. Whoops, that's Hernandez. We want Pereira. Look at this. Significant strikes landed per minute, 5.16. It's a very high number. His striking accuracy is at 54%. His striking defense is at 58%. Doesn't get hit that much. Takedown average 1.53. His takedown accuracy is at 55%, and his takedown defense is at 94%, which could be key in this one. Anthony Hernandez, very good on the ground. But yeah, not a ton to work with Pereira at middleweight. He's only had a couple fights up there, right? He's just had 3 fights at 185. I don't think there's any chance of him going back down to welterweight. So again, not a ton to, this is why this fight's so intriguing. I think, and we're going to talk about Anthony Hernandez in a second here. I think both guys, there's still a lot more to prove, but this could be a very big fight for both in terms of becoming a new contender in the weight class. And obviously a main event like this, huge opportunity for both. So that's everything you need to know about Michel Pereira. Again, his only losses have really been the result of bad fight IQ. Outside that, he's looked pretty good. But saying that, I mean, most of his opposition has not been that strong, even at welterweight. I mean, Chaos Williams is probably one of his best. But actually, Ponzinibbio is probably his best win at welterweight. Nico Price, And a lot of these guys aren't in the UFC. Amadiev's not in the UFC. Filiav's not in the UFC anymore. So that's just one thing I want to point out, because it's tough to say, is Pereira this good, or is it just that he's not fighting great opposition? We'll dig into that in a second here. Let's talk about Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. Very similar here. So 12-2 record for Hernandez. He's got 2 knockouts, 8 submissions, and 2 decisions. He's currently ranked number 13. So good matchmaking here. 13 against 14. He's 31 years old. He's 6 feet tall with a 75-inch reach. So he'll have a 1-inch height advantage in this. Or sorry, he'll have a what is it here? What am I looking for? He'll have a. Why is it not listing here? There we go. So you can see here, 75-inch reach for Fluffy Hernandez, 73. So he'll have a 2-inch reach advantage in this fight. He's got performance of the night 2 times against Rodolfo Vieira and Roman Kopylov. He's a BJJ brown belt. He trains out of MMA Gold and Mari Noble MMA in California. He made his amateur debut in October of 2011. He went 9-1 as an amateur as well, just the 1 loss there by submission. Made his pro debut in September of 2014, and then made his UFC debut in February of 2019, coming off Contender Series. Now, quick thing on that fight against Jordan Wright. You guys remember Jordan Wright, who was in the UFC for a brief period of time. He beat the brakes off Jordan Wright. That initially, I think, was a knockout win for him. But yeah, he just destroyed him. And the reason the fight got overturned, marijuana. I mean, come on. Failed drug test marijuana. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I think that's kind of a BS reason to get a fight overturned. So that could have been another knockout win for him there. Just keep that in mind. But yeah, he absolutely obliterated Jordan Wright. And the fight that got him in the UFC was a win over Brennan Allen, which at the time was very good. That was for the LFA title. That's a win that has aged quite well. I know we're coming off, the time we're recording this, we're coming off a loss for Brennan Allen at UFC Paris, but still, to beat Brennan Allen on the regional scene like that was very, very impressive. And that sort of put Hernandez on the map and got him the Contender Series fight. But went a bit tough to start his UFC career. He went 1-2, losing in kind of shockingly to Marcus Perez, another former LFA champ who I don't know what he's up to these days. And then he loses to Kevin Holland after that. So went 1-2 to start his UFC career. But since then, overall, he's gone 6-2. He's got 5 stoppage victories. He doesn't really have, the only notable win he has really is the Shabazian win. And that's just because at one point Shabazian was ranked. So I'd say Kopylov was good too. Kopylov was a guy that was sort of hovering around the rankings too. So you could count that as a notable win, but that was again where they kind of put both guys together to see who the better prospect was. And it clearly was Anthony Hernandez. He looked great in that fight. But yeah, Shabazian, another good win there too. And then his only notable loss is to Kevin Holland, 39-second loss. Again, I think what I was kind of hearing behind the scenes with him is there was a lot of personal stuff going on. There's some injuries because he doesn't look anything like that anymore. Hernandez doesn't. Not like if you watch the Marcus Perez and Kevin Holland fights, Hernandez looks a lot better when comparing that to the Kopylov fight. Again, I want to remind people fighters can get better. So I think that's been the case here with Anthony Hernandez. He's had a bunch of layoffs. That's a little bit concerning. And this again was part of the personal stuff I was kind of talking about. So I'm going from Kevin Holland to Rodolfo Vieira. There was a 273-day layoff. Remember, he was a big underdog in that fight. What was the odds on that one? Yeah, he was plus 375 and he gets a first round finish over a, decorated jiu-jitsu guy. That was a big win for Hernandez at the time. And if he had lost that, I mean, he might have been released. That would have been 3 of his last 4 losses getting finished there. So he had a big layoff there. Then going from Rodolfo Vieira to Josh Fremd, there was a 420-day layoff. Interesting guy, likes to smoke. He had a 420-day layoff. And then going from Shabazian to Kopylov, there was still a 273-day layoff. So not as active as you'd like. And I think that, if Hernandez was more active, we might be talking about him a bit more in the division, but he just hasn't fought a ton. So that is a little bit of an area of concern. He's had a number of injuries, a number of fights that he's withdrawn from. Got to mention that too, just because again, that adds up. So he's supposed to fight Puna Soriano in 2021. He had a hand injury. Supposed to fight Dustin Stolfus, had to withdraw due to undisclosed reasons. Supposed to fight Derive. Derive pulls out. Do you remember you were supposed to fight Dricus du Plessis? How interesting would have that fight been back at UFC 273? I believe what happened there was they ended up moving du Plessis to UFC 276 because they needed a big fight. So du Plessis fought Brad Tavares instead. So yeah, just one sort of notable thing there. And then you're supposed to fight Ikram. Remember that? That was going to be a big fight. And then Ikram ended up withdrawing from that one. He ends up getting Kopylov instead. And ends up coming through in flying colors. So yeah. And then all of these other opponents, for the most part, it's been their opponents pulling out as well. So just wanted to mention that, Hernandez, I'm sure would like to be a bit more active and a little bit more, getting it in there. But that's one thing that's kind of slowed him down a little bit. Hernandez has never been in any close fights. He's mainly finished his fights. And if you look at his UFC stats right now, significant strikes landed per minute, 4.30. His striking accuracy is at 59%. His striking defense is at 45%. He does get hit a little bit. His takedown average is at 6.62. That's going to be the interesting thing here. Can he get Pereira to the mat? He's got some very good submissions as well. His takedown accuracy is at 49%. His takedown defense is at 63%. So again, a lot to like here about Anthony Hernandez and what he brings to the table. We do not have odds on this fight yet, although based off what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing, I'm sure Pereira is going to be the favorite here. And if you look on Tapology, which costs you nothing, you can see here that Michel Pereira, 62% of Tapology voters picking him, just 38% picking Anthony Hernandez. Which way am I going on this one? This is a tough one, guys. This is, like, again, I can see the argument here for Michel Pereira, but I'm actually going to go against him here. And I'm going to take Anthony Hernandez, but I'm going to take him by decision. Now, again, this might not be a popular pick, but here's kind of my reasoning for that. So a couple things on Anthony Hernandez. First and foremost, Pereira's only been finished twice in 44 fights. Right? Like I mentioned, his 2 UFC losses were mainly fight IQ things. He has lost 7 times by decision, which makes up for 70% of his losses here. So you look at that, he mainly loses by decision. So that's why I don't think Hernandez will necessarily finish him. Do I think he can? Yes. But what's more likely? Probably a decision here. The big thing for me with Pereira, and it's always been the same case here, is he has bad fight IQ. I know that was a couple of years ago where he loses to Sanchez and Tristan Connolly, but that is a big red flag for me when it comes to his fights. And I think, let's be honest here, he's had very favorable matchups here for the most part, at middleweight especially. Andre Petrosky, hasn't been performing that amazingly. Ola Shaychuk's been a bit of a punching bag lately. Ihor, same thing, not great opposition. Now, look, I know Hernandez has not exactly fought world beaters either, but I think Kopulov's better than anyone that he's fought at middleweight. Edmund Shabazian, I think, is better. I know Shabazian has his flaws, but there's a lot of similarities between Shabazian and Michel Pereira. One being that not only do they train at the same gym, but they're kind of the same, where they go out there and they try and finish you early here. And, watching that Shabazian fight, he certainly won the first round against Hernandez, but Hernandez weathered the storm and ended up finishing Shabazian late in that fight. Marc-Andre Barrio hits pretty hard, finished him in the 3rd round. So again, there's some things here that I like about Hernandez. I think with Hernandez, I don't even think we've seen the best version yet. We saw glimpses of it when we saw him fight in LFA against Brendan Allen. I just think with the slow start in the UFC, the injuries, the layoffs and stuff, we really haven't seen, too much of him there as well. The other thing with Hernandez is he's only been finished twice in 14 career fights. I don't want to say those were flukes, but I think if he rematched either of those fighters, Kevin Holland or Marcus Perez, I think he wins those fights. So again, I think there's an argument to be made that Hernandez is very durable. I also think, despite them being the same age, that there's more potential for Hernandez. He doesn't have, like I said, he doesn't have the bad fight IQ. I don't think he's a guy that's going to get finished early other than those first UFC fights. I don't think that's really typical of him as well. And like I said, I think you give a slight edge in opposition to Hernandez. I was just so impressed with that Kopylov fight, and I think he continues that momentum as well. And the fact that he already fought this year, I think is very good for Hernandez here. So again, I think Hernandez is going to slightly edge this one out. I think there's more potential here. This is kind of one of those picks where I'm kind of using the eye test a little bit. While Pereira has been impressive, I think people are overhyping him, not looking at the opposition he's fighting, whereas I think with Hernandez, he's been a little bit more battle-tested. He's overcome adversity. There's a lot of things to like here. And I think Hernandez, personally, if I'm putting stock into a fighter and where they're headed, I'm putting more stock in Anthony Hernandez. So I'm going to go Anthony Hernandez decision to get it done over Michel Pereira in the main event. And if you can get him at plus money, which I think you will, I think that's absolutely a good deal there. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. What is your prediction for this fight? I know there's going to be a lot of Michel Pereira people picking here. I know there's going to be a lot of people picking Michel Pereira to finish this fight early. I can see it. But like I said, I think Hernandez, there's a bit more to show in the cage, and I think he rises to the occasion. Again, he got plenty of notice for this fight. You can watch my interview with him. It's on the UFC interviews playlist here on my channel. Really good mindset, really good stuff here coming from Hernandez. I've been very high on him at middleweight. I think he is the dark horse of this weight class. I know people are saying it was Brendan Allen. How about the guy who beat Brendan Allen a couple of years ago? It's Anthony Hernandez for me. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, at Lynch on Sports. If there's any other big fights coming up, let me know in the comments if you want me to preview them. This was one that I was debating on, but I just think this is such a fun fight. I had to dig in a little bit deeper on this one. So again, I'm taking Anthony Hernandez by decision. Let me know your prediction in the comments. Follow me, like I said, on all those platforms, and subscribe to this channel. And while you're there, hit that like button. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.